Everyone laughed when a quiet young man raised his hand at the millionaire's auction for the weakest, most battered horse in the ring. But what they didn't know was that horse had once been worth a fortune, vanished in scandal, and held the key to a mystery that had haunted the racing world for a decade. And now, it was about to change both their lives forever. The chandeliers cast a golden glow over polished wood and pristine hooves. Catalogs rustled in the hands of men in tailored suits, and women in heels too sharp for a stable floor. The air smelled of wealth, cologne, leather, old bourbon, and the hush of calculated money. Horses paraded through the ring like royalty, muscles rippling under gleaming coats, their pedigrees announced like royal bloodlines. Applause followed each sale. Applause and numbers, always numbers. By the time the final lot was announced, half the crowd had drifted toward the exit or the open bar. The auctioneer cleared his throat, his voice thinning with fatigue. Lot 48, bay stallion, 5 years, no known papers. The gate creaked open, and everything changed. The horse that stepped through wasn't paraded. He was limped in. Mud clung to his legs. His ribs pressed through a patchy coat that had once maybe shone. One ear drooped. Scars lined his flanks like forgotten stories. And his eyes weren't wild. They weren't fearful. They were quiet, tired, resigned. Laughter rippled through the room. Where'd they dig that thing up? Thought this was a millionaire's auction. Put him out of his misery. The auctioneer didn't even try. Opening bid, $100. Do I hear 100? Silence. A cough. A chuckle. The horse stood still like he already knew the answer. Like he'd been through this before. And then, from the back corner quietly, almost apologetically, a hand went up. Eli. He wasn't dressed like the others. Work boots, flannel, jeans with dust ground into the seams. Maybe 25. He didn't flinch under the stares or the murmurs. He just looked at the horse. Really looked, and nodded once. 100. Do I hear 150? Nothing. Sold. More laughter. Some of it cruel. A few claps, sarcastic. Eli walked down toward the ring as the handlers handed over the lead rope like it was cursed. The horse didn't move, just stared at him. And for a brief second, something flickered in those dark, tired eyes. Eli didn't speak. He didn't stroke the horse's nose or whisper promises. He just stood there beside him, still, steady, present. And the horse took a step forward. Just one. But it was enough. Because sometimes when something has been broken for too long, what it needs isn't applause or praise. It needs a witness. Someone who sees what's still there, underneath the scars. Eli held the rope. The horse followed. And as they walked out of the arena, past the laughter and the disbelief, no one knew his name, but they would. The sky was bruised with dusk by the time Eli backed the trailer into the gravel drive. His farm wasn't much, just a sloped patch of land stitched with fencing, a leaning barn, and a house that creaked in storms. But it was quiet, honest, and for now, it would have to be enough. The horse stood still as Eli lowered the ramp. No fight, no fear, just stillness, like he'd seen too many trailers and barns to care anymore. Eli led him out gently, every step deliberate, as if the wrong move might shatter whatever fragile trust had sparked between them back at the auction. In the barn, under the dim hum of a single overhead bulb, Eli got to work. It wasn't glamorous. The brush stuck in patches of dried mud. The mane came loose in clumps, tangled with burrs and brittle with neglect. Scars revealed themselves slowly, long and pale like rivers dried on old maps. A story no one had cared enough to read. Then Eli saw it, just above the left hind quarter, buried under grime and old hair. A mark, faint, crooked, almost erased. He leaned in, heart thudding. It wasn't a freeze brand, not entirely. It looked surgical, altered, like someone had tried to remove it but stopped halfway. He ran his fingers over the flesh. The horse twitched but didn't move. Eli stepped back and reached for his phone. The reception was spotty, but he managed a blurry photo. Then he sat down on a hay bale and started searching. Obscured brand on quarter horse, tampered horse brand meanings, famous missing race horses. It didn't take long. There it was, a photo, faded and pixelated, of a gleaming young colt. Muscles coiled like springs, ears pricked forward, eyes sharp, on his hip. A brand, distinct and swirling, identical to the ghost of a mark on the horse now standing in his barn. Name, Highborn Valor, foaled 10 years ago. Status, deceased, presumed perished in transport accident. Value at time of disappearance, $2.7 million. Eli stared at the screen, then at the horse. Back then, the colt had been fire. Now he was ash. But Eli had seen that flicker, the one that said something was still burning. Valor, he whispered. The horse didn't react, but Eli did. He rose to his feet, eyes never leaving the animal in front of him. Whoever this horse had once been, whoever had written him off, hidden him, discarded him like scrap, Eli didn't care. Not about the money, not about the mystery, not yet. He just knew one thing: this horse had been someone, and maybe still was. The next morning broke gray and cold, the kind of sky that never quite woke up. Eli stood in the barn doorway with a thermos of coffee, watching Valor shift silently in the stall. The name had settled in overnight, quietly, without argument. It just fit, like it had always belonged. But the questions kept gnawing. Why would anyone hide a horse like him? Why erase a brand, erase a legacy? Eli finished his coffee and crossed the yard to the old storage shed behind the equipment barn. It hadn't been touched in years, not since his father passed. The door creaked like it had lungs. Inside, dust hung in the air like memory. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, some half collapsed, others still sealed with faded tape and grease-smudged handwriting. He worked through them slowly. Old tack, race programs from years ago, weathered notebooks with his father's scribbled predictions, training notes, feed logs. Then buried beneath a stack of auction catalogs, he found the frame, a photo, black and white. A man, tall and wiry, stood beside a colt so perfectly poised it barely looked real. The horse's head was high, ears forward, legs square like a statue brought to life. A blaze down the center of his face and eyes that held something ancient and wild. The same eyes Eli had looked into last night. He flipped the frame over. A yellowed scrap of paper was taped to the back, faded ink, but still legible. W. Kane and Highborn Valor, Eclipse Prep, March 10th. Eli's breath caught. W. Kane, Walter Kane, a name that had once meant something in the racing world, a trainer known for turning raw potential into champions. Then one year, everything fell apart. Rumors of tampering, a failed drug test, a horse that vanished in the middle of a storm, and Kane, gone, disappeared overnight, like a man ashamed of the truth, or silenced by it. Eli stared at the photo. The pride in Kane's face wasn't performative, it was personal. Like that colt had been more than an investment, like he'd believed in him, really believed. He carried the photo back to the house, laid it gently on the kitchen table, and pulled out his laptop. A quick search told him Kane hadn't resurfaced in any official capacity, not in training, not in racing, but a few whispers in old forums and a comment thread on an article hinted at a small cabin town 2 counties over. Eli's hand hovered over his keys. He glanced out the window. Valor stood in the pasture, head low, tail swaying, but even from here, Eli could see it. The posture, the build, the echo of greatness just waiting to be remembered. He looked back at the photo. If anyone could confirm the truth, it was the man in that picture. Eli grabbed his keys. He didn't know what answers Kane had left, but he was going to find them. The road narrowed as Eli left the highway behind, trading pavement for gravel and the hum of engines for the hush of pine. Trees leaned in close on both sides, branches stitching the sky like they were trying to keep secrets buried beneath them. The address he'd found wasn't listed anywhere official, just a breadcrumb on an old forum thread, half believed. But something told Eli to follow it. Kane's place sat at the end of a winding trail. A modest cabin slouched against the edge of a clearing. Smoke curled from the chimney. A rusted truck with flat tires leaned into a collapsed shed nearby. It didn't look like the kind of place someone used to million-dollar horses ended up, but maybe that was the point. Eli parked and stepped out, crunching frost-bitten grass beneath his boots. The front door opened before he knocked. A man stood there, stooped, weathered, eyes sharp but tired. His hair had gone mostly gray, his beard thick and unkempt, but Eli recognized him. Same frame, same eyes from the photograph, though the years had taken more than just youth. "I'm not buying, I'm not selling," the man said flatly. "I'm not here for either," Eli replied, lifting the photo gently from his coat pocket. I think you trained this horse. Cain didn't move. Eli held it out. The old man took it with a slow hand. His gaze dropped. His face didn't change, not right away, but the stillness in him shifted. The silence became heavy. Then his thumb brushed the image like it was fragile, like the horse might disappear if he pressed too hard. He sat down on the porch step without a word. Eli followed. The wind moved through the trees, and for a while that was the only sound. Finally Cain spoke. That horse. His voice cracked, as if he hadn't used it in weeks. That horse was stolen from me. Eli's throat tightened. His name was Highborn Valor, wasn't it? Cain nodded slowly. He was lightning, raw and wild, but smart, smarter than most men I've known. They said he had no patience, no focus, but he just needed someone to speak his language. His eyes glistened. We were 2 wins from the Derby circuit. Then he vanished, overnight, said it was an accident, said he didn't make it. Who? Eli asked. Cain didn't answer, just looked out toward the woods like the answer was buried somewhere under the pines. They wanted him gone, he whispered. He wasn't supposed to win, wasn't born from the right money, so they erased him, and they erased me too. Eli said nothing. He didn't need to. He just handed Cain a new photo, the one he'd taken 2 nights ago. Valor standing quiet in the barn light, older but unmistakable. Cain's hands trembled as he held it. He's alive, Eli said quietly, and he remembers. Cain didn't speak. He just looked down at the photo like a man who'd just found his own ghost, and wasn't sure whether to mourn it or bring it home. The kit came in a plain envelope. No drama, no ceremony, just a sterile bag, a barcode, and a thin instruction sheet that told Eli how to pluck a few strands of mane without contaminating the root. He followed it exactly, hands steady, voice low as he murmured to the horse. Just a formality, he said, more to himself than Valor. But let's be sure. He sealed the bag, slipped it into the return envelope, and drove it straight into town. No tracking, no insurance, just a prayer that someone on the other end would care enough to look closely. And then he waited. Days blurred together. Eli spent them in the barn, shoulder deep in work that didn't feel like work anymore. Brushing, feeding, walking. He didn't push Valor, just moved with him, learned his rhythms, his hesitations, his quiet bravery. Valor didn't spook easily, but he watched everything. The creak of a door, the way Eli adjusted his grip on the halter, the shifting clouds above the pasture. Not just survival instincts, something else. Awareness, memory. One morning, Eli led him to the round pen, just to see. The stallion stepped in slow, head low, muscles tight like wires. But when Eli gave him space, something changed. Valor circled once, twice, then broke into a trot that carried more story than speed. His stride was long and balanced, smooth as poured water, the kind of movement you don't train, you uncover. Eli stood at the rail, heart thudding. You remember this, he murmured. Don't you? That night, he couldn't sleep. The weight of the past, the mystery, the silence, the scars, it all pressed in. But so did something else. Hope, the kind you don't talk about out loud. On the 6th day, an email arrived. Subject, equine DNA results. Confirmed match. Eli sat down slowly, blinking at the screen. The message was short, clinical. The submitted sample matched Highborn Valor's registered DNA profile with 99.98% certainty. That was it. No exclamation points, no blinking headlines, just the truth. Highborn Valor was alive. Eli closed his laptop, leaned back in the chair, and let the silence settle around him. Not the heavy silence of grief or loneliness. This was something else. A pause before the world changed. He walked out to the barn. Valor lifted his head as he approached, ears twitching forward. Eli stepped into the stall and ran a hand down the horse's neck, fingers grazing the hidden brand. They were wrong, he whispered. They buried you, called you dead. But here you are. Valor didn't move, didn't flinch, but for a moment, his head bowed, just slightly. Not submission, not fatigue, recognition. Eli smiled, soft and sure. We're just getting started. It started with a blog post, just a grainy photo. Valor in the round pen, his coat still dull but his stance unmistakable, and a caption, he was never dead, just hidden. Within hours it was shared. By morning, it was viral. The resurrection of Valor. Stolen stallion found on a quiet farm. From auction reject to racing royalty. Calls came in non-stop. Reporters, historians, fans who remembered the legend, and beneath it all, a hum of outrage. Questions no one wanted to answer. Who covered it up? How did $1 million horse end up limping into a dusty auction ring for $100? Eli didn't respond to most of it. He didn't care about clicks or ratings, but he answered one call, the one from the man who ran the auction. "Mr. Mason," the voice said, polished and cool, "you have something that belongs to me." Eli didn't speak. I had no idea who he was. None of us did. You understand, horses come through in all conditions. No records, no papers. It happens. Silence. "We'd like to make this right." Still silence. "We're prepared to offer you 600,000, clean, tax handled, full transfer by week's end." Eli looked out the window. Valor was in the pasture, tail swishing lazily, eyes half closed under the morning sun. He looked like nothing special, just a horse. But Eli had seen more. He had seen the moment Valor moved like he remembered who he was. And he had seen the way the stallion stood taller every day, like truth was beginning to bloom in his bones again. Eli brought the phone back to his ear. "Let me be clear," he said calmly. "You didn't lose him. You discarded him, like garbage. You didn't see what was in front of you." A pause. "So you're saying no?" Eli smiled, small and final. "Some things," he said, "aren't for sale." The line clicked dead. A moment later, the news picked up the story and ran with it. "Farmer rejects $600K offer to keep legendary horse." A camera crew showed up at the fence. Eli said a few words, enough to satisfy them, but he never moved Valor for the cameras, never trotted him out like a prop. He didn't need to prove anything, because truth doesn't need applause, it just needs time. One evening, after the headlines had cooled and the interviews slowed down, Eli sat on the porch with a blanket over his knees and a cup of black coffee in hand. Valor grazed nearby, the wind combing through his mane. "You were never theirs," Eli said aloud. "Not really." Valor lifted his head, ears twitching at the sound. "You're not a price tag." The horse took a slow step forward. Eli chuckled, the sound quiet. "Sure, you're a story," and the world was finally listening. The fairgrounds weren't built for legends. Faded banners flapped in the wind. Popcorn steam drifted through the air. A dented loudspeaker crackled with announcements over a dusty field where kids ran wild and old men placed quiet bets. It wasn't the Derby. It wasn't national, but it didn't need to be. Eli stood by the gate, reins in hand. Valor shifted beside him, calm but alert, ears twitching with every sound. His coat had come back to life, richer now, deep bay with hints of copper when the sun hit just right. The scars were still there, but they blended now, like part of the story, not the end of it. The exhibition wasn't about winning. No purse, no pressure, just a chance to ride, a chance to be seen. Eli didn't care if anyone remembered him, but Valor deserved to be remembered, not as a rumor, or a scandal, or a ghost, but as what he was. Power, grace, heart, they called his name over the speakers. Highborn Valor, ridden by Eli Mason, and a hush swept through the small crowd. Whispers followed. "That's the horse. I thought he was dead. Looks too old to race. Not him. Can't be." Eli swung into the saddle. No trainer, no team, just him and the horse, who should have never been forgotten. The gate opened. Valor didn't explode from the start. He unfolded, smooth, controlled, like he knew the track, the moment, the weight of every eye watching, and then he flew. Not like a young horse showing off, like a king, reclaiming his throne. The crowd's murmurs turned to silence, then to awe. Eli leaned low, hands light, trusting the rhythm he'd come to know like breath. Valor curved into the turns with elegance that made time blink. Dust kicked up behind them, swallowed by wind. It didn't matter that there was no finish line, no ranking, no trophy, because as they thundered past the stands, something deeper settled in Eli's chest. It wasn't just a ride, it was a reckoning. The past didn't get the last word, not the ones who'd erased Valor's name, not the ones who'd silenced Cain, or sold him like a broken tool. This was history rewritten, not by noise, but by movement, by presence, by truth. When they slowed to a stop, Valor stood tall, his chest heaving but eyes steady. The crowd erupted, not out of obligation, but reverence. Some clapped. Others stood speechless. Even the announcer faltered for a moment before simply saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, he's back." Eli slid from the saddle and ran a hand down Valor's neck. "You did it," he whispered. "No," he corrected silently. "We did." And for the first time he realized this wasn't just Valor's return, it was his too. Not the boy who watched races on grainy tapes with his father, but the man who stood beside a horse born for glory, and finally understood what it meant to carry a legacy forward. If this story moved you, if you believe in second chances, quiet strength, and the power of being seen, then subscribe for more true-to-heart narratives like this. Drop a comment if you've ever been underestimated and rose anyway. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder. You are not forgotten. You are just getting started.